covering the rape case that changed India. New Delhi, India, CNN. When I tell people outside India that I live in New Delhi, I almost always ask the inevitable question: do you feel safe here? Or worse, what's with the rape culture in India? The December 16th, 2012 gang rape of a student inside a moving bus has sadly become India's defining story of the past year. The horrific details so ingrained in people's memories. Indian cities are now perceived by many around the world as rape capitals. However, for anyone who knows India and lives here, these sweeping general generaliza- gener- generalizations are simplistic and unjustified. The definition of what constitutes rape varies from country to country, so there's no internationally accepted method of comparing India's rape statistics with those of other nations. New New Delhi rape exposes perils of being a woman in India, but in the country of 1.2 billion people, where local sexual assault cases which wouldn't merit a mention in the US or Europe now make headlines, you can be excused for thinking India is suffering from a rape epidemic. Even Indian women's rights activists will agree, rape is not part of the country's culture. It's certainly not a new phenomenon, and it's surely not particular to India. Heightened, heightened awareness. What is new to this country though, and what is significant, is the heightened awareness of sexual violence against women. This, the discourse has dominated local newspaper editorials and television talk shows this year. Women are now feeling more emboldened to ignore the stigma and report not just cases of rape, but even harassment, molestation, stalking, and voyeurism. Opinion: where have India's females gone? It it is this change that makes the December Del- Delhi gang rape a turning point for India and perhaps the victims' lasting legacy. Indian law pro- prohibits the naming of sexual assault victims, but to her family and millions of Indians, she will be remembered by the name the media gave her, Nirbhaya, or Fearless One. On December 17th, 2012, the day after the attack, I received a text message from students at New Delhi's prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University, informing the media of a protest being held at the location where the 23-year-old medical student and her male friend had boarded a bus the previous night. The white char- chartered bus that circled the city for almost an hour while the student was repeatedly raped by 6 men and sexually violated with an iron rod. I wasn't expecting a large showing after all. Sexual assault is sadly commonplace. Government statistics show a woman is raped every 20 minutes in India. Indian Spring, but when I arrived at the intersection, the in the in the upscale South Delhi neighborhood, I saw hundreds of young urban students holding hands, hoisting placards, shouting slogans. We are protesting here because she, the victim, could have been me. I remember reporting how unusual it is for this section of society to protest in New Delhi. They tend to be politically apath- apathetic because they are the materially contented, having benefited more than others from India's economic growth over the last 2 decades. But one after another, young women and men took to streets shouting, "Enough is enough! I'm protesting today because this rape is an everyday problem," explained one student. "I can't wear what I want. I can't go where I want without men staring at me. Where is my freedom?" asked another. What happened next was unprecedented. Unprecedented. Day by day, the protests swelled from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands, young and old, men and women marching to India's street of power, jumping over barricades, braving the water cannons in New Delhi's December cold. No one expected it to become so big. Some even called it the Indian Spring. The government was shaken to its core. Sometimes it just takes one incident to galvanize a society and to inspire change. And this certainly seems to be that watershed moment, I said during a live shot. Relating to victim. What was it about this particular incident that struck a nerve? The horrific nature of the act was one thing, but would people have reacted in the same way if this had happened in rural India? Probably not. As one student put it, "We are protesting here because she, the victim, could have been me." Many in Delhi could relate to the victim. She represented the aspirations of so many Indian girls studying hard, daring to dream big. The victim's family migrated to Delhi from a village in Uttar Pradesh state in search of a better life. Her father worked 16-hour shifts as a baggage handler at the Delhi airport to pay for her education. She even tutored several neighborhood children to help put her two younger brothers through school. She had a great passion for academics. Every year the happiest day for us was when my daughter's school results would come out. She would always be one of the top 2 students in class. Her father, Badrinath Singh, remembered proudly. She wanted to become a doctor and lift her family's status in society, a culture that places high value on social class. In some ways she succeeded. She managed to attend some of the country's best schools, get a job at an international call center, inspire her brothers to study engineering and aeronautics. On that fateful night she was watching Anne Lee's "Life of Pi" at an upscale mall, where young girls in skinny jeans and tank tops, hang out at Starbucks, shop at Zara, and eat sushi. Fighting for women. Almost 1 year on, I reflect on what's changed. I've met some incredibly strong women fighting against all odds in a society which often places less value on women. Sumanjit, 25, was pressured to abort all four of her babies simply because they were girls. How could they afford to pay for their daughter's dowry? Her husband asked. Daughters, especially in rural India, are often seen as a burden. A 16-year-old student from a lower caste known as a Dalit was gang raped by 8 upper-class men in the state of Haryana. When her father found out what his daughter had been through, he killed himself out of shame. Relatives and neighbors advised the family not to report the case to the police because no one would want to marry a tainted girl. Victims blamed in India's rape culture. I also met a mother who has been tirelessly fighting for justice the past 6 years. Her daughter was gang raped by wealthier neighborhood boys when she was just a teenager. This remarkable woman has hired more than a dozen lawyers, some female, but they all kept switching sides or said they could no longer represent her. The mother suspects they were bought over by the wealthier rapists. India's awakening. Under enormous public pressure, the government ordered the December Delhi gang rape case to be fast-tracked. But what about the tens of thousands of other rape cases left languishing in India's notoriously slow-moving judicial system? All of these women thought, though, no matter what corner of India they come from, have heard about the Delhi gang rape and the justice the victim eventually got. They say they too have a sense of hope now. In the headlines this week, the managing editor of one of India's most respected investigative magazines resigned in disgrace after he allegedly assaulted a young female colleague. He acknowledged a lapse of judgment, but insisted it was not assault. In another case, an intern accusing a Supreme Court judge of sexual harassment, stories which would have likely gone unnoticed, unreported a year ago. Something has shifted in India this year, an awakening of sorts. Nirbaya's parents take solace in this. They told me that they have lost everything. Their lives will never be the same, but they are proud of the change their daughter helped bring about. Let us not forget it was because of her sacrifice that all these changes have taken place, and I believe there will be more positive changes in the future, her father told me, underlining the societal changes emerging out of a personal disaster. Britain urges EU to change free migration rules. Britain wants to change the rules governing the free movement of people across the EU. Home Secretary Theresa May will tell European ministers. Mrs. May will speak in Brussels. ahead of the lifting of movement controls on Bulgarians and Romanians. She says free access to labor markets must not be allowed to lead to mass migration. Um, However, some countries have already vowed to defend they regard as a fundamental EU principle. EU Justice and Home Affairs ministers will meet in Brussels on Thursday. Mass migration. Mrs. May argues that problems caused by free movement must be addressed and the rules should be changed. In a statement, she questioned why national governments should not be allowed to impose a cap on numbers if European immigration reached certain thresholds. She said she planned to make clear at the Brussels meeting that "I believed we need to change the way free movement rules work." She added, "First, for future accession treaties, we must be able to slow full access to each other's labor markets until we can be sure it will not lead to mass migration. Second, looking ahead, we must seize the opportunity presented by the Prime Minister's plan to reform the EU and address the problems caused by free movement. It is right that the national governments of EU reform the way free movement rules work." Mrs. May is also expected to propose requiring new member states to reach a certain level of income or economic output per head before full access to free movement rights is allowed. Welfare systems. The debate is taking place in advance of the lifting of transitional controls on Romanians and Bulgarians. From 1st January there will be no restrictions on them working anywhere in the EU. BBC Europe correspondent Chris Morris in Brussels said there was sympathy for Britain's demand that abuse of welfare systems should not be permitted because all the countries share the same concern, but there was little support at the political level for fundamental reassessment of the idea of free movement, our correspondent added. One diplomat from an Eastern Europe member state said no one would accept some countries being treated as second-class EU citizens, because a free market in goods and services also has to be a free market for labor. Mr. Cameron has suggested that citizens from other EU countries will not be able to claim out-of-work benefits for the first 3 months in the UK and would not be able to extend claims beyond 6 months if they had no genuine prospect of work. Laszlo Andor, a European commissioner angered Mr. Cameron by commenting that the UK was at risk of becoming a nasty country if it curbed benefits and sought to limit freedom of movement by EU nations. Leg bone gives up oldest human DNA. The discovery of DNA in a 400,000-year-old human thigh bone will open up a new frontier in the study of our ancestors. That's the verdict case by human evolution experts on an analysis in Nature Journal of the oldest human genetic material ever sequenced. The the femur comes from the famed pit of bones site in Spain which gave up the remains of at least 28 ancient people. But the results are perplexing, raising more questions than answers about our increasingly complex family tree. The the early human remains from a cave site near the northern Spanish city of Burgos have been painstakingly ex- excavated and pieced together over the course of more than 2 decades. It has yielded one of the richest assemblages of human bones from this stage of human evolution, in a time called the Middle Pleisto- Pleisto- Pleistocene. To access the pit called Cima de los Huesos in Spanish, scientists must crawl for hundreds of meters through narrow cave tunnels and rope down through the dark. The bodies were probably deposited there deliberately, their causes of death unknown. The fossils carry many traits typical of Neanderthals, and either belong to an ancestral species known as Homo heidelbergensis, or as the British paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer suggests, are early representatives of the Neanderthal lineage. DNA's tendency to break down over time means it has not previously been possible to study the genetics of such ancient members of the human family, but the recent pace of progress in sequencing technology has astonished many scientists. Years ago, geneticists said they wouldn't be able to find DNA that was older than 60,000 years old, said co-author Jose Bermudez de Castro from the National Research Center for Human Evolution (CNREH), a member of the team that excavated the fossils. Of course, that wasn't true. The techniques have advanced hugely. Siberia to Liberia. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolution Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, under the supervision of Prof. Svante Pabo, have been helping drive those advances. The success reported in Nature was the result of applying techniques developed for sequencing the degraded DNA found in Neanderthal fossils to even older specimens. Professor Pablo, the Institute's director said, "Our results show that we can now study DNA from human ancestors that are hundreds of thousands of years old, adding, 'It is tremendously exciting.'" The scientists were able to stitch together a near-complete sequence of mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, the genetic material contained in the tiny batteries that power our cells, from the ancient femur. But comparisons of the genetic code were that from other humans, ancient and modern, yielded a surprise. Rather than showing a relationship between the Spanish specimens and Neanderthals, which might be expected based on their physical features, the mitochondrial DNA was most similar to that found in 40,000-year-old material unearthed thousands of kilometers away at Denisova Cave in Siberia. The Denisovans were a sister group to the Neanderthals, which distinct genetic characteristics identified only by DNA extract from a tiny finger bone and tooth. They are, as some researchers have remarked, a genome in search of a fossil, because there are no substantial remains representative of this group. By using missing mutations in the old DNA sequences, the researchers calculated that the Pit of Bones individual shared a common ancestor with the Denisovans about 700,000 years ago. Model in the middle. So there are several possibilities as to how Denisovans-like DNA could turn up in Middle Pleistocene span. Firstly, the mitochondrial DNA type from the pit came from a population ancestral to both the Spanish hominids and to Denisovans. Secondly, interbreeding between the Pit of Bones people, or their ancestors, and yet another early human species brought the Denisovan-like DNA into this Western population. Professor Bermúdez de Castro thinks there may be a candidate for this cryptic ancestor, an earlier human species known as Homo antecessor. 1 million years ago, antecessor inhabited the site of Grand Dolina, just a few hundred meters away from the Pit of Bones. Professor Chris Stringer from the London's Natural History Museum told BBC News, "We need all the data we could get to build the whole story of human evolution. We can't just build it from stone tools. We can't just build it from the fossils. Having a DNA gives us a whole new way of looking at it." However, he points out, mtDNA is a small and unusual component of our genetic blueprint, from which only limited conclusions can be drawn. For example, no sign of the interbreeding we know now took place between Neanderthals and modern humans remains in the mtDNA of modern people. To get the full picture, scientists had to sequence nuclear DNA that kept in a nuclei of cells from Neanderthals and compare it with that in present present-day populations. Likewise, the true relationships between the people and other ancient populations may only be known if and when nuclear DNA is available. This will be a challenge given the age of the Spanish fossils, but their good state of preservation, largely a product of the fairly constant temperature inside the cave, gives hope. That is our next big thing here, to sequence at least part of the nuclear genome from the individual in the Cima de los Huesos, Svante Pabo told BBC News. This will answer definitively the question of how they are related to Neanderthals, modern humans, and Denisovans.